You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, welcome back, book lovers and listeners. Kristen and I have a special treat for you today. We have the incredible Lauren Belfer. You will know her from her debut novel, City of Lights, which was a story about Western New York. Kristen and I are from Western New York. Lauren lived in Western New York for a time being, and we loved this book, City of Lights. We're not here to talk with her about that book, however, today. We're talking about her new book, but I know that you will recognize her first from that book, City of Light. It was a New York Times bestseller, as well as a New York Times notable book. It was a Library Journal Best Book, a main selection of the Book of the Month Club. City of Light was a bestseller in Great Britain and has been translated into 6 languages. Wow. Lauren Belfer is a beautiful novelist. She is an MFA from Columbia. You will recognize her second novel, A Fierce Radiance, which was named Washington Post Best Novel, NPR Best Mystery. What an honor, Lauren. Her third novel, After the Fire, was a National Jewish Book Award, and I adored that book as well. So Kristen and I are here to talk to her today about her latest novel, which is very close to our hearts. It's called Ashton Hall. Alka Yoshi, which is a good friend of BOOKSTORM podcast, who we recently interviewed, endorsed this book. Alka said it is a masterful, riveting, and atmospheric historical fiction. It made me want to don a velvet cloak, brew a cup of tea, and settle in to watch Hannah and her ingenious son unravel the fascinating, dark, century-old secret. Alka, you could not have said it better. Fiona Davis, another good friend of BOOKSTORM podcast, who we've interviewed, also endorsed this book. She said Belfer's latest is a brilliant, immersive story about one woman searching for an answer to a terrible discovery. I am thrilled to say that Lauren Belfer's fiction has also been published in the Michigan Quarterly Review, Shenandoah and Henfield Prize Stories. She also writes nonfiction that has appeared in the New York Times Book Review, Washington Post Book World, Christian Science Monitor. Lauren lives in New York City, and Lauren, we are honored and thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm such an admirer of the work that you're doing on BOOKSTORM and taking what you call a deep dive into all the books that you look at. And it's very unusual, I think, to really give that time where we can get deep into the nitty-gritty of how the books are put together and the issues that the writers are hoping to examine and what those issues mean to readers. So I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you for that nice comment, Lauren. We like to give our listeners a little bit of the backdrop of the story without giving away spoilers, of course. And so if you'll allow me, I'll go ahead and give a little bit of a summary. I would love to have you add anything if you would like to at the end. In the story, Ashton Hall, we have an American woman, Hannah, and her son, and they encounter history and their own future in a visceral way in this riveting novel. When a close relative falls ill, Hannah Larson and her young son, Nicky, join him for a summer at Ashton Hall. Now, Ashton Hall is a historic manor home outside of Cambridge, England, And Hannah is a frustrated academic whose ambitions have been a little bit put aside because of taking care of her son and mothering her son, who is neurodiverse. And she is escaping a little bit of stress in a relationship, and she's got a lot on her mind as she arrives in England. She and Nikki are settling in, and her son is the curious sort. He's very precocious, and he finds some secrets in this beautiful manor house that they are in. In fact, he finds the remains of a woman who has been walled into a forgotten part of the manor. And Hannah and Nikki are pulled into a search for understanding what has happened here. They begin looking at historical documents and library references and all manner of household documents. And as they put together this story, they are starting to understand things about themselves, about their future as a family. But it is a fantastic story that weaves in all different themes that really resonate with us today, but themes that also were very prevalent back in the 1600s. What a beautiful story. Would you like to add anything at all, Lauren, to our little summary there?
Well, thank you for that really wonderful summary of the book. I do want to say that it's the first of my novels to take place entirely in the present. And yet the point of the book is to go back in time and to unravel this secret. And I think when I came to design the novel, I was very concerned about the issues of how do we recreate the past? And that question was very important to me from a personal way, because at the time, my cousins and I were trying to find out information about our family in Europe from before World War II. And I was finding myself, looking at different kinds of documents from before World War II, and, business directories from Eastern Europe from before the war. There's so much material online that you can find. So I was looking at the ship manifests for Ellis Island, and I found my grandparents when they came through Ellis Island, and very moving. And so I began to think more and more, well, what is the evidence of the past? And I really brought that question to bear when Hannah begins looking at the past in Ashton Hall, to say that she begins to look at account ledgers from the past, and she gets the feeling that point by point, every little thing that the people bought for the household adds up to make an image of what the past was like and what their daily lives were like. And I felt that too with the lists of who checked out what books from the library, because I thought of my own life there, that I've always been a reader since I was young. So there, if anyone put together a list of the books I've checked out of the library, that would show a lot about me.
Yes.
Probably things I'd be very embarrassed about now. So I brought that into Ashton Hall as well. And it just something I've thought about a lot, that you could set a book entirely in the present, and yet I hope reveal an entire way of life of people in the past.
Absolutely. You did that wonderfully in this book. You really were immersed, even though it takes place in the present, in the past, which was just beautifully done. Well, if you're ready, we're ready to brave the storm. Chris, why don't you kick us off?
We are ready. We just loved this book so very much, Lauren. I felt it was a wonderful story also about becoming who you were meant to be, not what others think you should be. And I loved the character Nikki, as you said, was neurodiverse. Mrs. Gardner spoke some words to him that I underlined. It just hit me so strong as a reader. She said to Nikki, who was struggling with fitting into societal standards, she said, Nikki, you're an explorer. You're the finder. She saw the things that were special, unique, gifted, purposed in him, and pointed them out to him. And I just thought, we all need words like this, words of affirmation, positive, uplifting, purpose-giving, empowering words. Those words stuck with that little boy, Nicky. It started to grow him into who he could become. It gave him power. Can you expand on the importance of spoken words in your story, especially to neurodivergent persons, but also to all of us in the real world?
Yes, thank you. This is a really important point that, um, as kids grow up, and I suppose it's inevitable in a certain way. You don't want them to walk into the street. You don't want them to throw a tennis ball through the window. So as a parent, there's a lot of negative. Don't do that. Don't do this. As I say, some of it is to keep kids safe, but so often kids just wind up hearing this barrage of negativity, and this becomes particularly hard then for kids who are trying to adapt to the world because they're a little different from the normal, because they might fall under the neurodiverse umbrella. And they especially hear these negative messages, and unfortunately, sometimes from other kids, who will make fun of them or try to bully them. And so, if you can just, every day find one super positive thing to bring to a child, I think it's really transformative for them. These words of affirmation, as you say, because this applies to all of us. I mean, we all have something great. And another point I often think of, that parents don't want to see their children fail, and so they'll so often say, "Oh, don't do that. You can't do that." Because they have a sense the kid might fail at whatever it is. But how can the child ever succeed if people are saying, "Oh, don't try that"? And again, there's a fine line, because you don't want people running into the street. But to be supportive, to maybe let kids fail, to let them push the envelope a little. I think that's important. But words of affirmation are so important for adults too. And again, we don't want to give spoilers, but there's a character in the novel who's struggling with her marriage, and her husband seems to say to her, "Well, you couldn't survive without me. I'm the one who lets you survive." And here she stops to think about that for a minute, to say, "Oh, is that true?" Because when someone says that, and they say it so confidently, "You couldn't survive without me," I think as women, we often think, "Oh, well, maybe that's right. Maybe I couldn't." But, then she realizes, she thinks about that. And um, I just wish that we could all, particularly for our children, embrace this idea of affirmation every day in some way.
You did it beautifully. And I want to add, there was another character in the story that ended up being very good friends with Nicky, and her name was Janet. And both of these children were neurodiverse in a different way. And I loved the way that you wrote the parents to be so supportive and embracing and almost celebrating their uniqueness by allowing them to be unique. They put on these little plays, and they wanted things a certain way, and they were brutally honest with their comments. But it struck me, I loved their little friendship, and I loved their honesty. And I thought, just what you just said, we're so quick to give negative criticism, which seems to stick so strongly with us. But if we could just allow ourselves to see the positive in every person, especially those who are different, which is what you showed us with these two just beautiful, heartwarming characters that you created in Nicky and Janet, and the uniqueness and openness of their friendship. It's something we could all learn from.
Well, I think that's right. And I love Nikki and Janet, and the little jokes they have between them. Um, at the same time, I know it's hard to raise them. And their parents do want so much for them to be everything they can be. And, Janet loves Shakespeare, and she's organizing Shakespeare plays and rewriting Shakespeare, and she loves that. But she can have a lot of difficulty at school too. So I tried to show from the aspect of the parents what a difficult balance and how frustrating it can be. And it can bring so much self-doubt to parents, especially because parents don't get that much support from the world around them. And it's not unusual for grandparents to say, well, why aren't you have stronger discipline? Or you're too harsh. You get sort of tossed between these two sides. You've got to be tougher. No, you're too tough. Um, Rather than just taking things day by day and meeting the kids where they are and trying to bring out the best in them.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to go back a little bit to the historical aspect that you were talking about. Here, the lived reality of Isabella Cresham's life is as important as what she represents in this sweeping story. On the one hand, the difficulties and the religious persecution of the times really defined certain aspects of Isabella's life. This is the woman from the 1600s.
Right.
But on the other hand, she faced some of the same problems that women face today in terms of dangers of childbirth or jealousy, perhaps financial dependence, maybe limited options. And I was wondering, even powerful men making decisions about their lives. And I was wondering if that was something that you were really trying to show, that these factors across time and for millennia are ones that women have to contend with.
Well, yes, that for me, the primary similarity between the two women, Hannah today and Isabella in the 16th century, is that they were both struggling to find a way to control their own destinies. And of course, women have made extraordinary strides since the 16th century. I'm not intending to make a one-to-one comparison, but so many factors that have limited women's lives were true then and are still true today. One factor might be caregiving, whether, caregiving for your parents or caregiving for children. And it's wonderful, of course, to raise children. And if you are able to take care of your parents when they need you, at the same time, not all women are necessarily even capable of that. There's an assumption that, of course, women will be caregivers, but not all of them can. And because women often give up their work to have children, today they find themselves in positions of economic dependency. And that too, makes it very difficult to control one's own destiny when you suddenly find yourself completely dependent economically. So there were these factors back and forth that, yes, women's lives have been revolutionized since the 16th century, but in certain very basic ways, there are similarities that we can understand what those women of centuries ago went through, and we can understand the decisions that they had to make, felt they had to make, just to find some little piece of themselves that they could hold on to.
Yeah, very well put. In fact, I was thinking about the walls being very physical, for Isabel, but the walls were not physical necessarily for Hannah. And she had walls of her own making, this thinking that I am dependent. She's not necessarily dependent, but she had been internalizing those comments maybe from, her spouse. And so I thought it was really well done with how you were comparing this historical periods and this idea of these walls, keeping them in. And of course, Hannah has more options today. She can have help in terms of childcare, but the similarities were very striking, and the things she had to weigh. Very, very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I felt with Hannah, she gave up her career willingly to care for her son, and she loves him so much. And yet she comes to realize, I think, that it wasn't good for her to make herself dependent, because none of us know what the future's going to bring. And then there comes a point where she's trapped within, or feels she is, within those walls, because she willingly did what she wanted to do of taking care of her son. And then step by step, she's able to change her life, um, always trying to do what's best for her child. Uh, these are very hard questions. There are no easy answers, and it's it's easy sometimes when you see a movie or something to say, what? Of course, just leave your husband, just walk out the door. But that's not what life is for any of us, I don't think. The grand gesture is fine for a movie, but in terms of lived life from day to day, um, we sort of have to maneuver more than make a grand gesture.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very well put.
That's what I loved about the book. I think you showed us through these beautiful characters that to have the courage to explore your life, to take a good look at it, to question things. And the one thing I loved in your story was that you did address sexual orientation, sexual preferences, and also an individual sense of personal and social identity based on those. I can't give away any spoilers, but one character allowed someone in their life freedom in this regard, to be whoever they wanted to be. However, that character turned around and did not grant her the same freedom. So this character had to reach a point where she said, I'm going to have the courage to say no. I deserve respect. I deserve freedom. I deserve choices of my own. And I loved to see the growth of this character that you gave her through this. And I wondered, what traits did you instill in her? Or maybe that all of us should be cognizantly aware of, that allows us, even the neurodivergent population, to rise above society's standards and to have the courage to say, no, I am not going to fit into your box. I'm going to be who I know in my heart that I am supposed to be.
Well, these are really difficult issues, I think, among the most difficult that we struggle with. And I don't know that the characters in the book ever found, except for like step by step by step, there wasn't, again, there's no kind of grand gesture or particular characteristic that they were born with that let them find a path to freedom. It was, maybe tacking like a sailboat, what's going to work? If I go this way, if I go this way, struggling along step by step, to find their confidence. And a lot of these issues do come down to confidence. And I often think about issues of equality in marriage, which is something people think about a lot. And, when people make a partnership, they should agree on certain kinds of freedoms and limitations for each other. And as you say, there's a couple in the book where she grants him a great deal of freedom, but he won't grant her the same freedom in return. And she would be willing to stay in the marriage, but then she realizes, but I don't have the freedom that he has. How can I live with myself? So that's one thing that when very pivotal for her, when she realizes, wait a minute, we're unequal. How can we have a marriage of inequality? And even though she feels a financial dependency, she maneuvers her way to try to gain her independence. So I think she's at a very different place at the end of the book than she was at the beginning of the book. When I think of her journey, it was a struggle, of trying to find her confidence and her courage. I wish there were that you could snap your fingers and have that confidence and courage, but it's just living through it, I guess, and finding the path through it, making your way step by step.
I love that. That really sums up life, I think, for all of us. It is a step by step journey, and life is a struggle in a lot of ways. And I love that you showed the growth in that character. The reader is going to love this. It gives the reader hope, not just courage, but hope. And maybe just expands the reader's mind to understand that they can change, fight for something, and grow. I just love that. Thank you.
Yeah, that was very good. In fact, you used a tacking ship analogy, and I was thinking in my mind, navigating life. And so I was thinking exactly
Right.
along the lines that you were. That's a great example. Let's go back to the 1600s. Isabella writes that she was imprisoned yet free. She had reached a place of contentment and acceptance, even in light of the life sentence that she had. And I think a big part of that was there were no distractions. She had nothing that she could do in her walled prison that she was in. And I was wondering if that was an idea of meditation that you were getting at. This idea of removing everyday distractions and being able to focus on what was important to her. And for her, it was her faith. And I was just wondering if that's necessary for all of us at some point in our lives to really step back and contemplate where we are.
I think that's something that probably all of us should try to find time for every day. And there are many different ways to do that. Um, for some people, it's prayer, that they have a prayer practice every day. Um, for other people, well, a funny example in my own life, I practice the piano. I'm a very bad piano player. um, but I find that at that supposedly half hour, but usually I can only do it for 20 minutes because I'm not very good at it. That time that I try to do it, I have to give 150% focus to that and nothing else, and eliminate all extraneous thoughts from my mind, or else I make mistakes. And there's something when I get to the end of that 20 minutes, very renewing and refreshing about having done it. I have a friend who does a kind of Zen meditation every morning, which is also a type, that you try to clear your mind. Um, and for me, also, fiction writing is that kind of meditation that if I can get up early every morning, as I like to do, and sit down and write fiction, changes the whole day for me.
Yeah.
Because I've had that moment of absolute focus on one thing. Um, and if the writing's going well, of course, that makes it a better feeling afterward. Can't
Yeah.
always count on that. But um, I think for all of us, that's a very renewing and energizing thing. It's ironic to have the idea that you have time away from everything else, where you just have maintain a very, very narrow focus, then gives you strength and energy for what happens later, rather than exhausting you for later.
Excellent. In fact, I thought that Isabella and the clarity that she had towards the end of her life was very inspiring to Hannah, even if she didn't agree with the method or maybe the
Right.
basis for her meditation. And I thought that that clarity of thought was one of the ways in which Hannah grew throughout your story. And I thought that was really cool and
Oh,
inspiring.
thank you. Thank
Yes,
you
I,
for
I loved that. And I love that idea. Our readers are going to embrace that because everyone needs that one thing, walk in the woods, the meditation, the writing, the music, just listening to music for some people. But we at Bookstorm Podcast are very happy that your writing is giving you this because we're all benefiting from Lauren Belfer's beautiful writing. And can you tell us what's on your radar? Can you give us a clue about what you're working on next?
well, I'm pretty far into my next novel. Um, I thank you so much for asking. I always get a little nervous with this question. And so I've learned, I get very superstitious about it. And so I've learned over time that I just don't say anything about it because my feeling is, a novel to me is a living thing and it's always changing and evolving. And I worry that if I talk about it, it's like saying, like committing myself to going down a certain highway. Whereas, in a month, I might think, oh no, I really want to, take a swerve or take this exit, but I talked about it, I committed myself over here. So by not talking about it at all, then I feel I can explore wherever the characters are going to take me in the novel because they're living their lives through the novel, right? These fictional characters, I always want to feel they have absolute freedom to develop their stories where they go. I know that it might sound a little odd to talk about characters as if they're independent, but I always feel when the writing's going well, and I know, of course, it's all within my subconscious, but when it's going well, the characters go their own way. And that's such a great feeling, to just be listening to what they want to do, to listen to what they say. And sometimes they yell at me, they're not happy. Respond to that too.
Well, we can very much appreciate that and honor that you want to keep that close to your heart. We're very happy that you are in the midst of writing something right now. We've had a lot of other authors who don't want to share either because the same exact reason. So that's wonderful. We can't wait to see what you have next, Lauren. For our listeners, you are just going to adore this book. Please pick it up. It's going to make you look at life differently, at people differently, at minority groups with a more open, willing eye, and we just loved it. And you're also going to want to stay in contact with Lauren Belfer. You can find her on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lauren. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. Thank you for the wonderful and really important and thought-provoking questions. I really appreciate this chance to get into the real details of what I was trying to do in the novel.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you and your writing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Ashton Hall, for all of our listeners, was such a rich and beautiful, poignant story. There's so many things I want to talk about from there, but I want to bring up, so many things I wanted to talk to Lauren about but didn't get a chance to. There was a quote from the book that I didn't get a chance to say to her, and Mrs. Gardner, the character in the story, asked this one question. It hit me so strongly. How many lives can you imagine yourself living? And I sat there and I thought, about 50? There are so many different paths that we can take. I think when you're a youth, you do fantasize more, spend more time to think, what can I do? Maybe I'll be this, maybe I'll that, maybe I will live here, maybe I will marry this kind of person, maybe I won't marry anyone. And you have this opportunity. But at 17 and 18, how do you have any idea what you really want to do? You're so young. Now, if I were given the chance, oh my goodness, there's so many other things I wish I could be doing. How many lives could you imagine yourself living, Kristen?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. First of all, my dad, who has since passed away, but he always used to say, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. and I know what he's saying because, first of all, as you mature and you discover new talents or interests that you have, now you see more of the world and you see where you could go down a different path that we didn't know existed, especially, before the internet when we were coming of age. But also, I always think about something you just said, and that is how certain decisions really send you on a trajectory. The person you marry, if you get divorced or a first job that you take, those send you in a direction. Having children, right? And maybe none of those things by themselves are good or bad. It certainly sends you in a direction. So when you ask that question, I can see many other lives, had I not done this or moved to this city or taken a job here, I could have gone in a number of different directions. But I do think that the core of who I am probably would have been a common thread through all of those directions. I care about injustice, I care about certain things, that would have come to the fore no matter what I did. What do you think?
I do. I agree, absolutely agree. And for me too, because I'm very grateful that we have tapped into our passion, which is our gift. I always say your gift is your passion and it's what you like to do. And the three go round and round in an endless circle. But sometimes I think, gosh, I wish I had another chance to do something a little bit different. And it hit me when Mrs. Gardner said this in the book, that I thought, we do have another chance. Every single day is another chance. Yeah. You can reinvent yourself. It doesn't matter how old you are. And I just thought that was something I wanted to bring up to the readers. The other thing I loved that we did touch on is this neurodiversity and the importance of it, and the importance of embracing those neurodiverse people in society, allowing them to be themselves, celebrating them. The character Nikki and Janet in the book were so blatantly honest that I actually laughed out loud a couple times, because I thought, these are things we all wish we could say to someone, but we don't say it. And it was such a breath of fresh air, wasn't it? I thought, we can learn from that. Maybe we do need to be a little bit more honest. Maybe we do, like in the story, need to take time out from the day and say, I want to put on another Shakespeare play. I want to find time out of the day to do what I love to do. I just think that these people, this neurodiverse community, we need to pay more attention to them. And we need to learn from them a little bit more. That's sort of what my biggest thing out of this book that I just treasured.
Yeah, and I would agree on even a scientific and research level. We don't understand the brain fully. We don't understand, first of all, this idea of neurodiversity. It's just coming into the lexicon. We're starting to understand aspects or characteristics, but we don't understand what makes our brains different, how they develop in many respects. And I think that is a fascinating area of, first of all, research, but also, like you said, learning, understanding people better. That was interesting. But the other aspect that was interesting is, as a parent dealing with a child who maybe has some special gifts in areas that we don't fully understand, and certainly people around you don't understand, I think there is a big challenge, because there's that constant fear as a parent that, what if my child acts differently? We're out in public, we're going to a party or restaurant. How am I going to cope with people staring, running us out of there, or truly even a safety issue that occurred, for example, in this book? So I think supporting parents who are dealing with children who have unique gifts and abilities, also understanding these unique gifts and abilities better, these have to be priorities for us as a society.
And stop trying to fit everybody into a little square box of being the same person. I love that you said that, because she did honor parents of neurodiverse children in this book, because she showed them being super supportive, but she also showed them sometimes not knowing what to do.
Yes.
And just trying to be patient and push through. Like she said, take a step at a time, a day at a time. And that was very important. This book touched on a lot of very delicate issues. The same thing as sexual orientation in this book. Listen, you be who you want to be, but let me be who I want to be. Kind of sums up it for me. I'm like, do whatever you want to do, but let me do what I want to do. And that's sort of the freedom of breaking out of society's mold and out of this little square. I'll never forget when my kids applied to college, they, according to the college application, and this is a while ago now, they had to be super smart, they had to be a volunteer in their community, they had to be on student council, they had to play an instrument, they had better be in a sport. And I'm sitting there thinking, why? Why can't they just be a volunteer kid? Why can't they just be a sport kid? Do we all have to be all things? This has to end, because we're putting pressure on these kids to be things they never were even meant to be. Let them just be a band kid. Maybe they just love an instrument and that's all they're going to be. And isn't that good enough?
Yeah, absolutely. For readers, and again, we can't give away any spoilers, but I thought that Lauren very delicately handled an issue relating to gender identity and same-sex choices, and again, I wish we could talk about it, but I thought it was an issue that is not discussed in the media or in literature that I have seen before.
I loved it.
I thought it was very well done.
I love books, and we always say fiction is real. I love fiction books that explore real life tough issues or what some may consider as a hot button topic, but it isn't. We should be allowed to talk about everything. And so thank you so much, Lauren, for this absolute treasure of a book. I want to say thank you to our listeners. A little shout out to you know who. You know his name by now. It's a household name. Everybody knows it. The extraordinaire producer slash sound engineer. Here he is if you're on YouTube. And if you're not, you're going to want to check him out on YouTube. The Mr. Mark Carey.
Hello, everybody. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we will see you next week.
They did, Mark, thanks to you, and so did we. I have to say, stay tuned to BOOKSTORM. We are so thrilled. We're helping to launch The Lost Girls of Willowbrook by Ellen Marie Wiseman. We have Hester by Lori Lico Albanese. We have The Violin Conspiracy that actually we both cried during this interview by Brendan Slocum. The Edge of Summer by the magnificent Viola Shipman. The Secret Keeper of Jaipur by Alka Joshi. Secluded Cabin, Sleep 6 by Lisa Unger. The paperback release of The Postmistress of Paris by Meg Waite Clayton. The Many Daughters of Afong Moy by Jamie Ford. Her Last Affair by John Searles. And Fox Creek by William Kent Kruger.
Oh, I can't wait. In the meantime, listeners, stay on the radar with BOOKSTORM by visiting our website at bookstormpodcast.com. You can visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you'd like to see us in person, or better yet, one of our authors, you can see us on YouTube. Just search for BOOKSTORM Podcast. Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep with life-changing fiction.